In this video, I'm going to be explaining why Marxist theory is wrong. This is a different question than why central planning doesn't work in socialist economies. This is why Marxist theories are incorrect in analytical terms, not about how planned economies work in practice. The part of this video where I explain Marxist theory is based on The Worldly Philosophers by Robert L. Heilbroner, specifically Chapter 4, The Inexorable System of Karl Marx. According to Marxist theory, all profits are computed down to zero. On its face, this can seem plausible if one understands that competition would lead to rivals competing away all excess to provide the lowest cost. But if one thinks about it for a little more, the logic falls flat on its face when you apply common sense. Why would anyone go through the trouble to invest their money when they could just consume it or just sit on it and store the wealth in their basement vaults or wherever else? It is easier and safer to just sit on your money and bury it in a safe place than to actually invest it if there were no return. So naturally, if profits were zero, people would refuse to invest until shortages caused prices to rise to a level that provided profits that justified the trouble of investing. Profit is compensation for both waiting for a return and losing the ability to spend the money in the meantime, and risk of loss. Think about it. If you were given the choice between receiving $1 million today and $1.2 million, adjusted for inflation, in 10 years, what would you choose? You would probably choose the million today. Even a 2% return a year would not be enough to entice you to choose to wait and invest the money for 10 years. Higher profit is needed to compensate people to wait longer for a return. Hence, a 10-year bond has a higher premium than a 2-year bond. Profit is required to entice people to invest to compensate for risk of loss. People will not invest in something with a risk of loss unless there is higher profit to entice them to choose that investment. Riskier investments require higher profit to entice people to put their money there over less risky options. There is also a third factor to profit, which is the scarcity value of capital, but this doesn't always have to exist, so I'm not going to explain it further here. And compensation for time and risk will mean all other profits will remain elevated by the same fixed amount above the scarcity component of profit. Now that you know what profit is, how it works, and why it will always automatically exist, we can examine Marxist theories. In Marxist theories, profit should be computed down to zero. Quote, "It is a world in which every commodity sells at exactly its proper price, and that proper price is its value, a tricky word. For the value of a commodity, say Marx, essentially following Ricardo, is the amount of labor it has within itself. But now the first difficulty appears. How, asks Marx, can profits exist in such a situation? If everything sells for its exact value, then who gets an unearned increment? No one dares to raise his price above the competitive one. And even if one seller managed to gouge a buyer, that buyer would only have less to spend elsewhere in the economy. One man's profit would thus be another man's loss. How can there be profit in the whole system if everything exchanges for its honest worth?" In Marxist theory, the reason there was still profit at all was because of excess man-hours of labor. According to Marxist theories, an employee has no say over what working hours they choose and must accept the hours chosen by the employer. Therefore, the employer could demand the employee work longer than the time necessary to make up the wage cost. Demanding excess man-hours from the laborer provided extra earnings to the employer, exceeding the cost of the wage. According to Marxist theory, this was the source of profit. However, over time, increased capital accumulation would lead to increased demand for labor, which would drive up wage costs. The higher wage cost would cause the cost of labor to exceed the value of earnings from the worker's output, including the revenue derived from excess man-hours. At this point, profit would disappear and cease to exist, and a capitalist system would collapse. Now, Marx thought that capitalists would have something available to do before things got to that point. They would substitute labor with machines, reducing their demand for labor, and therefore their wages, back to their previous low levels, thus maintaining the ability to have profit. However, because machines are not labor, but a capital cost in Marxist theory, you cannot demand excess man-hours from them, and so you can't derive profit from them. Quote, "It seems as though the capitalist has saved the day, for he has prevented wages from rising by creating unemployment through machinery, but not so fast. By the very process through which he hopes to free himself from one horn of the dilemma, he impales himself on the other. As his profits shrink, each capitalist will redouble his efforts to put new labor-saving, cost-cutting machinery in his factory. But it's only by getting a step ahead of the parade that he can hope to make a profit. But since everyone is doing precisely the same thing, the ratio of living labor, and hence surplus value, to the total output shrinks still further. As more and more production was done by machines, and they replaced workers, the capitalist ability to derive profit would decline until it disappeared, leading to the inevitable collapse of the capitalist system anyway. The first issue with all of this is that, over the long run, increased productivity does not reduce demand for labor, because total demand for goods increases too. Lower costs are passed on to consumers, leading to increased demand. If productivity increases, you don't make half as many goods, you make twice as much goods with the same labor. Even if eventually demand for one type of good is satiated, the lower cost of the good frees up income to be spent on new goods, so total demand still increases. So eventually higher labor demand and cost will overcome the wage-reducing effect of machines. However, according to Marxist theory, rising wages will still cancel out the effect of excess man-hours and eliminate profit, so capitalism will still collapse. However, as I described, profit is a phenomena that simply automatically exists for the reasons I described before. So as wages rise as a result of the capital accumulation process, capitalists continue to make profit, and the process continues without disruption. By 1886, real wages in England were almost double their 1840s level. Quote, "Conditions were better, perceptibly and significantly better. Although prices had risen, wages had risen faster. And not only had wages gone up, but the very source of surplus value had diminished. Hours were far shorter. Indeed, the mill owners complained that wage cost had risen by better than 20%. If capital accumulation is able to continue because profit is not dependent on the wage level, then wages continue to rise along with capital accumulation, and the capital accumulation process is in the interest of workers. If wages rise along with capital accumulation and the growth of capitalist business, then there is no need to overthrow capitalism and implement communism." Please like this video, comment, share this video, subscribe to my channel, and go to my main channel page for more videos.